Tēnā koutou katoa, e hui nei, tēnā wa, tēnei wā. E mihi mahana kia koutou, kia tai mai ki tēnei hui o Transparency International New Zealand. Tēnā koutou e mātanga o te moana nui a kiwa. Talofa, malolele, nisa bula, kia orana, hello geta, aloha, good day, kaya, winya and dia gwitch, kia ora. Tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou. Julie Heggie, CEO of Transparency International New Zealand, and I'm thrilled to greet you. We are honoured by your attendance at our webinar today. Greetings to experts from across the Great Pacific Ocean. It is a sunny winter's day here in Wellington, what is sometimes called te rā tui, the thin sun, which gives us some light and a little warmth. I'm going to open with a very brief extract from a blessing by Holly Walker to get us started. We now recognise and smile to our own ancestors, welcoming them to be with us and to share in our learning, growth and joy. It's my honour to greet you at the second of our second set of webinars that we're running to encourage information sharing and courageous discussion with Pacific people, including in Aotearoa. Our aim is to improve understanding and transparency around some gnarly issues by elevating Pacific voices. The first of this particular set was wonderful, profiling Indigenous governance in the Pacific. 3 wonderful speakers facilitated by Fenton shared the upholding and direct application of Pacific traditional knowledge in relation to environmental challenges. It was a fantastic session and is available on our YouTube site. Thoroughly recommend it. Prior to that, our first set of webinars focused on corruption around financial systems and the impact of transnational organised crime on Pacific people. Reducing corruption is what Transparency International New Zealand and our global movement is all about. This set, running from now through to August, looks at environmental governance, when natural resources are allocated without transparent and fair involvement of Indigenous people, women and local communities, then trust in public systems is completely eroded. Corrupt political, public sector, criminal and private practices are often the foundation for natural resource exploitation and damage. Across the Pacific, communities are confronting corruption, displacement, climate injustice and the marginalisation of traditional governance. They are guardians of the Moana and the whenua, working at the flax roots and the power systems of action, policy and culture. Ngā mihi to Rochelle Stewart-Allen, who has curated these sets of webinars and done all the really hard work, and to Zenaida of For Purpose, who is managing our tech. We can only do these forums also with funding. Thank you to Transparency International, with funding provided by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Australia. I'm going to hand over to Fenton shortly, but just some housekeeping. First, this webinar is recorded and will be posted on our YouTube site. Please ensure you mute your microphones and keep your cameras off. Also bearing in mind that we have variable internet connections, so we hope we'll all hold, but that's just the way of it. This is an information sharing event. We assume a range of understanding of the topics, so that if there's anything you don't understand, please ask a question in the chat. Please also use the chat to comment and ask questions from our speakers. There are no dumb questions. We want it to have kōrero that's really useful, and we're very happy to field questions after the event as well. And finally, our values are integrity, courage, transparency, respect, and non-partisanship. We bring those values to this hui today. We respect different opinions. We can all learn from each other. So that's enough talk from me. I'm now going to hand over to Fenton. For those who haven't had the pleasure of meeting him, Fenton Lutunatabua is a Pacific climate advocate, storyteller, and a facilitator with a background in community organising and environmental justice. He has led regional campaigns amplifying Pacific voices in climate resilience and governance, and is known for creating inclusive spaces for dialogue, reflection, and collective action across the region. Bula vanaka, Fenton, over to you.
Thank you so much, Julie, for that incredible opening and welcome. Bula vanaka, everyone. My name's Fenton Lutunatabua, and I am very excited to get into today's talanoa. We have an incredible lineup of panelists for TINZ's webinar series today. As always, we hope today is more than just a webinar, but really an opportunity for Pacific voices to lead conversations about environmental governance. The webinar for today is titled Her Role, Their Future, Supporting Pacific Women in Environmental Governance. And in this talanoa, we get to shine a spotlight on inspiring Pacific women that are leading climate justice, environmental stewardship, and governance solutions that are deeply rooted in lived experience and cultural knowledge. My sense is that we will hear stories of frontline advocacy, governance, and action from Pacific women, gather insights into gender equity and the role of our mothers, aunties, sisters, and nanas in environmental leadership, and also explore justice, courage, and community care, all the best things in life. Before I introduce our panelists, we would love to hear from you. Like Julie said, please feel free to use the chat to let us know where you are joining us from and what climate justice looks and feels like for you. As the chat is being populated, I'd love to introduce the first of our three panelists. First up is Naima Taafaki-Fifita. Naima is a Tuvaluan climate lawyer and advocate at Ocean Vision Legal and founder of her nonprofit, the Moana Tasi Project. Naima works to elevate the voices and leadership of Pacific women, youth, and communities in ocean governance and global climate forums. Her approach brilliantly weaves storytelling with culture and identity to mobilize action and amplify grassroots perspectives. Naima, thank you for being with us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Fenton. Talofa koto, toko ingoa ko Naima te Taafaki-Fifita, o se tino Tuvalu mo Amerika, toko tupuna tangata ko whalailiwa Taafaki, whalailiwa whao mai whenua nukupatao mo Vanuatu I loto I Tuvalu. Hakwetai lasi ko mawata avanoanga o to atu maumua nei. It's a privilege to be with you all today, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak on an issue that is deeply personal and profoundly urgent for many of us in the Pacific. Again, talofa koto, my name is Naima Taafaki-Fifita, and I'm currently calling from Chile, Tahuna, Queenstown, in Aotearoa, New Zealand. My father is from the islands of Nukupatau and Vanuatu in Tuvalu, and my mother was born in South Tarawa in Kiribati. And like many Pacific families, mine is spread across the region from the Marshall Islands to Aotearoa, with some of them in this room. My work, as Fenton mentioned, focuses on developing culturally grounded and just responses to climate-induced displacement, particularly for Pacifica communities. And I'm trained in international environmental law and Indigenous rights. And so I work at the intersection of legal advocacy, climate governance, and the recognition of Indigenous authority. And so this focus led to the establishment of the nonprofit, the Moana Tasi Project, or One Ocean Project, which I'll speak more about shortly. But first, I'd like to begin with the context of Tuvalu. Next slide, please. So, as many of you may already know, Tuvalu is a small atoll nation that's situated between Hawaii and Australia. And it's one of the most vulnerable countries to sea level rise and other climate impacts. Over the past 30 years, sea levels in Tuvalu have risen by nearly 6 inches. And so the rate of increase is accelerating exponentially, already 1.5 times faster than the global average. And there are countless studies and projections indicating that by 2050, most of Tuvalu's land area will be below high tide. So this is not a distant scenario. It's the reality that we are already grappling with and have been living with for quite some time. Next slide, please. So when we talk about climate vulnerability in the Pacific, it's important to recognize the many roles that Tuvaluan and Pacific women hold as caregivers, providers, cultural practitioners, and environmental custodians or stewards. And these responsibilities, as research continues to show, are directly and profoundly impacted by the climate crisis. In my research for this talk today, I found one study that reported climate change, seriously affecting the health, education, and safety of teenage girls in the Pacific. And many had to stop going to school because of damaged infrastructure or blocked roads, and others faced floods or water insecurity, rising illness, and increased levels and risks of gender-based violence during and after climate-related disasters. And so one thing to consider too is that as the land becomes less productive and fresh water harder to access, it's often women who are forced to adapt first. And this is quite a heavy burden. They're dealing with extreme heat. They're trying to feed and care for families without clean water, traditional food sources. And yet, despite all of this, Pacific women continue to carry and protect our cultures, our languages, and our sense of identity. So I often think of the women in our communities as the cultural anchors of our communities. They teach our fatele, our traditional songs and dances, and they continue crafts like kolose, which is a Tuvaluan kind of crocheting, where each pattern tells a story that's tied to land, a memory, or kinship. And even when the materials shift from pandanus to plastic, the meaning and the purpose still remain. I'll speak more about these spaces shortly, but I did want to share one moment that stayed with me that took place during one of the intergenerational dialogues that was hosted by the Moana Tasi project, where a 14-year-old girl joined with her mother, who is Samoan. She had never been to Tuvalu, didn't speak the language, and she was born and raised in Aotearoa, New Zealand. But when she stood to share, she spoke through tears about how her Tuvaluan grandmother had taught her how to crochet the pillow patterns, the ones that we rest our heads on. And she said that simple act became a way for her to understand Tuvaluan values of kindness, of love and care, even without ever having set foot on the land. So that moment really reminded us all of what's at stake. And so many of us are reckoning with what it could mean to lose Tuvalu entirely. I've spoken with countless Tuvaluan mothers, and I feel this as a mother myself, who are trying to take their children back home while there's still time, so that they can walk the land, hear the language, and be part of the story before it disappears. And so while this sense of loss is real, so is the leadership of women who are constantly responding, adapting, and organizing. I think it's important also to mention that as more men leave to find work, women are stepping into expanded roles and running households, engaging in planning and sustaining their families through small businesses and local trade. And even with this level of responsibility, their voices are still too often missing from the decision-making spaces. And there are exceptions. For example, the Tuvalu Coastal Adaptation Project, or TUCA, has striven to include gender from the beginning. It had a project where it created jobs for women and youth and embedded local knowledge into the design and construction of coastal protection measures. But projects like this are still not the norm. So in global climate negotiations, women may not always be the ones at the front of the room or leading the delegations, but they're often doing the technical work. They're often the ones building the coalitions and shaping the conversations from behind the scenes. And I've seen how women think about communities and the whole family, as everyone is affected by climate change. So they challenge these narrow definitions of expertise, and they help redefine leadership in ways that take responsibility for providing care, for encouraging interdependence, and ensuring cultural continuity. Next slide, please. So in response to some of these challenges, and in collaboration and thought partnership with so many, The Moana Tasi project was created, and it's led by Pacific women to support and amplify the voices of all Pacific people. But as an initial project, we're focusing on Tuvaluan communities as they confront the very real and growing possibility of permanent displacement. So over the past 2 years, we've held more than 10 intergenerational South Talanga, or community dialogues, or talanoa, where people come together to share their experiences, their cultural knowledge, and their hopes for the future. And these are not simply storytelling sessions, they're spaces really for collective memory. And these are spaces where resilience is actively reflected upon and built. And there's often clarity, political and otherwise, that comes through these conversations. Next slide, please. So unlike, extractive research models, Moana Tasi is built on relationships, and it's designed by and for our communities with a strong focus on young people. And so parents often bring their children along because they see these spaces as grounding. It's a way for them to connect, for their children to connect with culture, language, and identity. And so, as I mentioned before, even mothers who are not Tuvaluan but are raising Tuvaluan children bring their families so that their children can hear these stories and understand where they come from. What's shared in these conversations does not stay, on the margins. It actually informs the development of policy ideas and community positions, with their consent, with their permission. And next month, we'll be returning to Tuvalu to continue this work, especially in light of the Falepili Union with Australia, because these dialogues are really helping us articulate in our own words what justice and dignity and self-determination look like in the context of climate-induced migration. Next slide, please. So I'll be wrapping up shortly, but I think the impacts of climate change shows us two things at once. One is that women are among the most affected, but they're also among the most equipped to respond. In the Pacific, women hold deep knowledge systems, and they maintain strong social networks, and they play key roles in community care. And all of these factors are absolutely essential to adaptation and resilience. And yet, their contributions are still too often overlooked in policy spaces. It's not enough to simply consult women. We still need systems of governance that make space for meaningful inclusion, where women have the authority, they have the resources, they have the support, and recognition to influence decisions that very much affect their lives and communities. So, good policy isn't just about technical solutions, it's about relationships, and it requires cultural integrity and a genuine respect for the lived experience of all people. I think women's leadership should never be seen as an add-on, but as a foundational component to building climate responses that are just and sustainable. Next slide, please. To close, I would just argue that achieving climate justice really cannot be separated from achieving gender justice and equality, and that the insights and lived experiences of Pacific women are not just relevant, but they're essential. We are holding households together, we are passing on culture, we are caring for land and sea, and we are building resilience in our communities every single day. But of course, it's not enough to simply acknowledge that. We actually need real structural change, which means creating space for women in leadership, resourcing grassroots work, and making sure that cultural knowledge is now, a part of how we shape both national and international priorities. And while the climate crisis is devastating, because it is, it also creates an opportunity, a profound opportunity to rethink what leadership looks like and what values we want guiding our decisions. So it's a moment to move forward toward governance models built on care, on equity and respect, and models that strive to reflect the full range of human experience and that allows community the world over and the entire earth to thrive. So I think I'll wrap up there because I'm probably over time. So Lasi, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Naima. That was incredibly insightful. Thank you for showcasing the leadership of women at the front lines of both ocean justice and climate justice. And also just reminding us that this really isn't a distant scenario, right? This is something that informs and dictates how we need to relate to the places that we call home. And especially for women who carry the brunt of this burden in ways that often remain invisible, like anchors under the waves. So just again, thank you for visibilizing this work and these women. Super grateful. And if anyone has any questions, we can put that in the chat and we'll address them when we get to the discussion part of the Talanoa. But I'll go ahead and introduce our next speaker, Flora Vano. Flora is a climate justice leader and the country program manager at ActionAid in Vanuatu. He has spearheaded climate adaptation programs, including the Women Tok Tok Together Network and the Women Wetam Weta Early Warning System, mobilizing thousands of Ni Vanuatu women in disaster preparedness and resilience building. Flora's incredible leadership bridges grassroots action and policy, connecting traditional knowledge with inclusive governance and international climate advocacy. Really important work you're doing, Flora. Thank you for making the time to talk to us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you, Fenton, and thank you, team, for inviting me to this space. It's always, really good to connect with climate activists and also Pacific people in the same arena or the same space. I think the first thing I wanted to do is to let everybody know about the context of Vanuatu. And we have been hit hard over a few from 2015 coming through. We got cyclone, one after the other. The recent one hit us hard was the twin cyclone in 2023. And then an off-season cyclone that follows after that. And of course, last year in December, we got the 17th, in December 17th, we got the earthquake. And that just, I would say it redesigned Port Vila for us. It redesigned all the buildings. We got a lot of demolished buildings. We got a lot of climate change impacts for women and vulnerable marginalized groupings, disability, single mothers, and our community have been affected highly, and we are still in recovery mode. So given that Vanuatu is prone to multi-hazard, we are also a very patriarchy society still in the Pacific. We only got one woman in parliament, and you can see where this is looking on women's participation and voices of women in the national spaces coming through. Now, that's the country context. And, of course, women is coming, near that benchmark that we will say we are included. That's where Women in Tok Tok Together comes in. Now, let me start from there. When we started Women in Tok Tok Together in Vanuatu, we started with 3,000 women. In our space here, most of the people thought, or partners or stakeholders, that we couldn't thrive. We couldn't make it work because they have, but it couldn't. They have tried over the years, but never we have a collective agency of women. Now, with ActionAid, we have done so in a few other countries, not in the Pacific, but that's what for Vanuatu, it's a very comprehensive programming. And we have picked up the lesson learned from other countries and put it all together and only focus on women's rights and women's leadership in climate change adaptation and, in the climate resilience spaces, and also a gender responsive and inclusive governance within the structure. The first picture I have that you could see, I put in women-led inclusive response. Now, the objective that women in Tok together, we have here from 3,000 women, now we got 10,000 women after the 2024 earthquake. The main objective is to create a platform of locally led Ni Vanuatu women who organized and mobilized around their rights and resilience to climate change and disasters. And that was the core objective and goal of the whole network. And within the platform, we have the ask that the women wanted. What is it that the women thought that they have missed? Now, I think the first information that we have received from the information center when we set up back in 2015, women have not even received any warnings because they do not own radios, they do not have mobile phones. Communication was only to the men in the community and to their husbands. And so the husband has their own meeting space in the Nakamal that space was only meant for men, not for women. And that was the culture, that was our traditional, and this is what we have lived and brought up with. That space is not for us women. And we were not being included also in our structure. The governance system that has been laid out in the community doesn't include us in that space. We were not invited on information to access. We were not invited on decision-making spaces. We were not invited to a table to have a discussion. That's not us. And we knew from the time the word go, when you were brought up, that's what your parents told you. You, as a female, you will be married off, surely. So working in this sector, it's very challenging, but we have, I would say we have break barriers and we have made milestones. In saying that, the first picture we had was the women-led inclusive response in DRR. We have seen that women were always being left out on responses, on disaster committees, on climate change committees. And what we have done, well, is a program that we did for climate resilience, sustainable agriculture, which is mainly like, gender responsive alternative to climate change. What are the impacts that we are getting from the ground? Now, the women are talking. We do not just thought of the programming, but the activity actually comes from the women. Now, the women were saying our garden has been destroyed time and time again by, heavy storms, by the seawater, by cyclones, and also by ashfall, by acid rain from the volcano. And what is it that we are to do as women leading the whole network in Vanuatu? We look at what the women were saying, and we are putting it into, okay, let's make it be program, let's make it be a activity that because of their thoughts and their leadership put into that, let's make it work for the women in the community. And so the initial response mechanism that we did for, food insecurity was one of the main things when disasters happen. They were always left out on our NDMO distribution data collector. We were not included. Single mothers, they were told you go to your parents' house. Widows, they were told you go to your son's house. But if your son have a daughter, and the have a wife, and it was your daughter-in-law, but if the daughter-in-law in peacetime doesn't like you, like most of our daughter-in-laws, well, I hope I have one good one, but most of the women we work with, some of the daughters-in-law were not, easy with them at the peacetime. When it comes to disaster, they will be left hungry if we put them with their sons. And that was the information we were getting back. So how do we deal with this? Now, the program that we've invested heavily on was CRSA. It's one of the tools that ActionAid uses, climate resilient sustainable agriculture, which we brought in agroecologies within the Ministry of Agriculture. We brought in the climate scientists, so VMGD, the meteor water forecast people, they were also there. What we were looking at is getting that information scientifically and bridging it with the local indigenous knowledge. How do we bridge that gap in sharing those knowledge in one space? Scientists with the agronomist, looking at the soil over time, how do we make the soil fertile? Now, once we get that balance, we told them about the 3 garden initiative. Like 1 garden is for your economic empowerment, 1 garden is for your response, which means you can respond it to your next door neighbor or to the next community, and the other garden is for your own consumption. And from that, we are also addressing health. Now, we, in most of the remote communities, the women were saying, we only roast food. We don't have anything like we can boil cabbage and, bake. So earth often is one of the used cuisine in country. Every woman knows how to do a laplap, like a underground earth often one, and that was the normal thing they usually have. And when we put in, talk about the nutrition pack of food or balanced meal that you need to eat, that's another ball game. We need to make sure that we need to let them know you plant this type of vegetables, root crop, it provide this, provide that, livestock, it will provide this. So there's a lot of learning when we look at food security. So we put in that CRSA training on board. And from there, we also have them, they have delivered food, and they also did the response back in 2010 on Tropical Cyclone Harold. It hit us, it also hit Fiji. But the women in one community, in one island, brought over 17 tons of food over to Port Vila to distribute. So I think that is also something that women are leading those response. Back in the days, the chief are the one leading the response. I would say the chief will talk to the other chief, will make this road, but they were seeing it, there's a change in the mindset that not only chiefs are doing it, but women are rising up to that space. So when we do the response, we are also looking at inclusions of women with disability. Now, women with disability is always a hard one to track and to always monitor when we look at climate change adaptation or inclusive governance. Sometimes it's always, we are just ticking the box. Now, for us, we do not tick the box because the women themselves with disability are also leading the responses. What they do, they have their own, we have their data, and they've got data in good time. So in peacetime, they collect those data, they know where their disability are and what food they have and what type of sickness, who are they with, what type of house is this house, and on those risk preparedness planning. Are they prone to, if we have a category 2, 3, 4, and 5, what are the status of this particular? So it's very detailed because of the preparedness planning that also comes with it. We capacity build women with disability to engage in that space also. So I think this is one of the things that was very, I think the first step we were doing, we've got pushbacks because we are female. And so we have to do a lot of awareness and, campaign around that. And we were also, getting to policy spaces to make sure that, we were included. There's policy there, but we are implementing, but in an inclusive, gender responsive, but inclusive way of implementing. Then we also have the early warning system. Now, women were, from my first information, I did introduce that women did not receive information rightly. And because the device, they don't own radio, they don't own smartphones or they brick phones. Only their husband would have those device or the handset. Now, from the initial consultation with the women, because of the communication that they did not receive, Women Wet'em Weather was contextualized as a learning from Fiji Femlink. They have community radios for early warning. So we have our early warning mainly on SMS, and that's mean we have private partnership with Digicel, and then we also have trainings with FMCD to look at the early warning of, detecting those signs of, what is it that triggered tsunami? What is it that earthquakes come? How do we know from the science perspective? And then also the traditional way of us being able to tell a cyclone is coming in the next 2-3 months. There will be heat wave coming, or a storm will be coming because the eggs have, the turtles lay the eggs so further away from the sea. So there are a lot of indigenous knowledge sort of being shared when we do the warm wet and weather preparedness training, because we got the scientists down to us. They talked about all the science and how they monitor weather patterns, what are the clouds are for, how can you differentiate a normal cloud and a cyclone cloud, and how do you see a storm cloud. So those are scientific things that women in our communities don't know, but they will tell you exactly what the indigenous knowledge are. And so getting them to understand the purpose of the multi-hazard early warning preparedness, not one, it also assists them on the 10-step preparedness planning, which they have for water, for health, for education, for food security, for livelihood, and also for the gender-based violence that is happening in the community. How does that evolve on peacetime, and then during, and also after a disaster? Next slide, please. And from that work that we do, we were also engaging on, regional platform, the climate advocacy spaces. So I've put here ABCMDRR. I've put in how we collaborate with government in those spaces. From that photo, we've got the minister there, director of NDMO is there, our DG from the Ministry of Climate Change is there, and a Department of Local Authority Director. So there's a lot of interaction with our government because we are communities, we speak for the people, but they are the policy makers. So we always look at it in a line that it have to complement the government. We don't want to step on toes since it's already a patriarchy society, the system in place, but whatever we do aligns with what the government is also planning. Our people's plan, the 2030 people's plan, our national gender equality policy, climate change adaptation policy, and shortly we'll be launching a loss and damage policy. So all of this policy, the consultation, we have to be in it to make sure that our voices are there and our voices are heard and are included. Also meaningfully participated. We are not just there to tick the box, but we also there to communicate what a women's agenda needs to be, how that translated to the women on the ground. So we bring that narrative to policymakers when they're looking at policy, how to include us meaningfully, not just a word there, but it's in real life, we can't do it. Now, in looking at those advocacy, we were also there at COP. I think one of the bigger one that we had in country is our National Disability Committee that the Ministry of Justice is looking. He is the chair of the committee, and we were part of it also. Within the humanitarian clusters, we were part of the comms cluster, where Woman, Wet and Weather is actually the comms, another comms platform that the national government uses, because we can simplify the message that goes to the community. And that is also something that we build that strong partnership with NDMO and FMCD on. And from there, we also have a very good research that comes out with UTS from the 3 countries, from Timor-Leste, Fiji, and Vanuatu, that for every $1 we spend on preparedness, we actually save $4 on humanitarian action. And that was also some of the highlights that we shared on the GBDRR, the Global Platform of Disaster Risk Reduction. Our voices are there. Our voices are with the ABCMDRR, COP, and we are also inputting on the ICJ, the International Court of Justice Advisory Opinion. We were also there. I'm also part of the witness stand. So our voices as community women from Vanuatu and small island state is also being put in on that platform to enable the judge for we're expecting for a very good outcome on the advisory opinion that will be coming out on the 23rd of July. So that's another cross finger that it will went well. The sustainability of the program that we run here is partnership. One, building that partnership and building trust. And also, the investment of women leadership. And I think that I wanted to thank the Australian government for putting a lot of investment into women's leadership across the Pacific. And we were fortunate to be one of the beneficiaries that we have taken the fund to do the work that we do. And also the sustainability of it also looks at the intergenerational. Why I put that word in, it was because, the older women are older, they are getting their time. Their time will come soon. The younger woman needs to come in and fill those places. So the model we use is making that leadership role also available, so you can stand aside and you co-mentor another women. So you do not just step back and you let the women to fail. You mentor them and you make sure that the younger one comes in to lead, and what you put in have to be sustained throughout. And of course, the sustainability comes with economic empowerment for women. We need to have a sustainable economic hub that sustain incomes that come in. If the funds stop coming, what do we do? The sustainability plan have to come into play. So ActionAid won't be in Vanuatu forever. They also have an exit strategy that in due course, once Womani Tok together became a federation, which we've launched it in 2024, it will be a federated entity. And so ActionAid also needs to plan the exit to move from Vanuatu maybe to another country to empower women. And the ownership is, Ni Vanuatu women, we own the platform, we own Women Talk Together. And we take it with pride because it's the only space that we can be us. And it's the only space that open conversation to gatekeepers, to community leaders, to chief. We will use the word climate change because if we talk about women issue, they will say, you go back to where you just came from. So we are very crucial. It's also cautious to be able to maneuver ourselves throughout 5 islands that we work with for 10,000 women that we have empowered, and how they have seen the inspiration and take it and lead their own community. They are now part of the disaster committees. They are part of the provincial committees or even the operations center during emergency. And they were also being asked and consulted by government to be in consultation for policy. And we've never had that, but I think breaking a barrier, making small steps, taking the lead is something that we will cherish. And, thank you to the Australian government to look at that and, to see that women in Vanuatu or Pacific Island women can also do something. Not only the men can do that, but women also. So I will leave it there. Sorry, I can talk all the way, but I know, I guess I am over time. I think my last slide was just, a thank you to the platform that can allow my voices to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Flora. That was really incredible to listen to. Thank you for showing us what women-led climate resilience and inclusive governance looks like for you all in Vanuatu. I'm sure you hear this a lot, but those climate adaptation programs that you shared stories about are truly inspirational, especially for me because of their practicality and sort of perceived adaptability, right? As you're talking, I can be like, oh, something like that could easily work in Fiji, like without a doubt. So thank you for that. Thank you for spearheading that. And also in many ways, doing the ongoing work to dismantle the many forms of patriarchy as it exists in our cultural context. Appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing so generously. I'm going to round out our panel today now with our final speaker for the day, AnneMary Raduva. AnneMary is a dynamic Fijian youth advocate who's known across Fiji and the region for her bold stance on climate justice and gender equality. As a fierce young leader, she speaks from lived experience about the intersection of culture, family, and environmental activism. Her work champions really beautifully intergenerational learning and positions young women as crucial voices in shaping our region's future. Thank you so much, AnneMary.
I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I meet you all today. Nondono mai Vanuatu rangana tuisuva. On the same note, I pay my respects to elders past and present. Bulavinaka, noae mori, and good afternoon. I was 10 years old when I joined a few climate change warriors on the Greenpeace ship in 2013 in Suva when it called for a port call. While on board on a public tour of the Esperanza, we were told of the arrest of 30 Greenpeace activists and journalists on board the Arctic Sunrise by the Russians. I knew I had to sign an international petition to free these environmentalists, climate warriors, and journalists. And I didn't just sign the petition, I also wrote hope messages. And this experience sparked my passion to advocate on issues that matter, and I have no regret in joining young activists to speak of our climate crisis. I was a year 4 student back then, and I remember trying to understand or to know more about climate change, activism, campaigning, global warming, or underwater or seabed mining and drilling, and small steps to care for our planet. In 2018, I made a bold step to raise awareness on balloon releasing, calling on the Fijian government to revise and amend the Fiji Litter Act Law 2008 and to classify balloon releasing as a form of littering. When I started talking about balloons, I was bullied and challenged by business houses and adults to give them an alternative to using balloons, and was even mocked online when I launched my Say No to Balloon Releasing campaign. I took the challenge and turned to mangrove planting and fought back by walking the talk. So instead of using balloons to celebrate a milestone or an event, I encouraged people to plant mangroves, native trees, and to explore other environment-friendly alternatives. But it wasn't easy. But my parents told me and have helped me to put my campaign activities up in prayer. And I'm very blessed that praying has helped me stay focused, and I have no shame in praying at any mangrove planting site or at an international speaking place. At the tail end of the global COVID-19 pandemic, I joined Her Excellency, the Honorable Prime Minister of Samoa, Honorable Fiame Naomi Matafa, and the former President of the Federated States of the Marshall Islands, the Honorable Hilda Hine, in a BBC World documentary on female leaders fighting climate change in the Pacific as the world prepared for the COP meeting in Scotland. It was an honor to be in the same space with 2 female leaders, but what struck me on the day of the documentary shoot when the BBC team arrived at home was having military and civilian around at the same time. I was 16 years old. I wasn't naive. I counted 4 of them, neatly dressed, very intimidating, and very serious. And to be honest, it was quite a frightening experience. But fear has concrete power from keeping us to say and to do things that are of our purpose. And I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna let this fear and intimidation dictate how we weave our story for the BBC. And I didn't allow them or their presence to control what I wanted to share with the BBC today. The reality of youth activism, and it is not out of the ordinary. When I entered the public sphere, I was mentally, emotionally, and spiritually prepared to be criticized. And I took comfort knowing that throughout history, people have been quick to criticize youth activists because they are threatened by the message and power to influence. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege to be here today to share my experience as a young woman climate activist, and I'm grateful for spiritual guidance and empowerment to be recognized as a young woman leader and to be a voice to youth activists in Fiji and in our region. Youth activists should never be underestimated. History has proven that youth movements have the power to affect change. I am most passionate about environment conservation and climate change, and I believe that the fight against climate change come in many forms, from poetry reading to storytelling, and from United Nations negotiation rhetoric to planting mangroves here at the Suva foreshore. The beauty about this fight is that there is no legal age minimum or formal qualification to join this fight or to be an activist. Anyone can be an activist. Young people have a history of pushing social change forward. And if you think I'm talking nonsense, you might want to Google some of the historical movements around the world. History tells us that young people from any era have a catalyst for change. My experience as a young woman activist is completely life-changing. I never imagined myself becoming a young activist, nor a person of interest. Young people are standing up and demanding change because it is our future that is at stake. I am not special, but I'm here today to ask you all to become an activist in your home, communities, and workspaces. We are in a unique position to use our network to disrupt, to recalibrate, to append, to challenge inequalities and the norms, and be the force that transforms processes and sparks the change. My peers used to look at me and think I was a rich kid back then, and still now, organizing all these cool campaign, mangrove planting initiatives and foreshore cleanups. But to be honest, my campaigns were planned around my mom's payday and to the tide. It wasn't much of a budget, but my mom made sure that there was enough money for transportation, reusable and degradable garbage bags, gloves, and light refreshments, so that I could continue to create awareness and attention on protecting our foreshore and mobilizing young people to take ownership of our environment. When I started the call to ban balloons and to classify balloon releasing as a form of littering, I was told and reminded in several occasions that I should be in school, that I should concentrate on studies, get a good job, and leave campaign work to adults and professionals. I was 15 years old at that time, and I saw the disrespect and the ignorance from adults and so-called leaders. They're either on their phones, gadgets, or they walk away when they see younger children and young activists my age talk about climate change, environmental issues, and sustainable development. I have also had adults blow balloons in my face and mockingly call me balloon girl. But I wasn't offended. I smiled throughout. In fact, I raised my head higher, knowing that the message is clear and that people are talking about balloons. In our small corner in the Pacific, we may not have the respect we deserve as young activists, but we are and have mobilized my generation to protect our Earth because we have lost hope in our adults. I'm convinced now that my purpose here on our planet is to save it from the mess created by the generations before us. I was 10 years old when I started my call for a safer planet. Today, at 21 years old, I am beginning to wonder if children and young adults my age feel overwhelmed by the immensity of the challenges we face. And if there's one message that echoes forth from this event, let it be that we young people have this resilient ability to get back on our feet every time we are pushed aside, overlooked, written off, and ignored. We may be sidelined in many decision-making platforms, but this only builds the momentum for us to be protagonists in the fight for our right and well-being. We, the young people, are more than prepared to engage. Adults make a lot of assumptions about us and what we are capable of, and those assumptions are often quite false. To not include us is anti-democratic. We deserve to be listened to be seen as collaborators, and to be treated as equals. There is always a misconception that our youth and women have no say on socio-economic and political issues, and we are discriminated because of our age and gender. To spark the change and ignite youth and women involvement and action is to give us our space, allow us to claim it, live it, and transform it. We are often subjected to a culture of silence, and from personal experience, whenever I raise my voice or an issue, I'm instantly seen as disrespectful, disobedient, and rude. We are living in times where our human rights are used in almost all kinds of arguments. It is not going to be easy, but it is worth it. Let us carry our own chairs to tables where we are not invited and let them know that no youth should ever be restricted, held back, and denied their right to participate in decision-making. Let us mobilize so that no youth should ever be told again that you cannot, you will not, you dare not, and that should not. Ladies and gentlemen, as a climate activist, I have realized how much power and influence youth-led movements have. It is no longer about world leaders meeting at the United Nations in New York or some exotic place making decisions for us. It is no longer about signed documents, handshakes, and group photos. We want to be invited to tables where we are not just seen, but heard as well. We are saying enough with eloquent PR twisted speeches and oratory winning scripts, but we need raw and honest messages, messages that comes from the heart and not from guilt, shame, and power. I may have empowered a few younger children and youths and adults in general with mangrove planting initiatives and public speaking, but the real heroes are our Indigenous communities and youth who have been taking care of our mother planet for years because it is their culture and it is their way of life. On home soil, I have been blessed to be mentored by conservationists and climate change warriors that have set the bar high for us younger activists, not just in Fiji, but in the region and international spaces as well. And out of our anguish and disappointment, we are telling the world that decisions made on climate change are too important to be left to adults who we cannot rely on anymore. And if there's one thing that I've learned in my campaign and events, is that you cannot rely on anyone to walk your talk. Vinaka.
Thank you so much, AnneMary. I'm so proud of and inspired by you, AnneMary. Thank you very, very much for the hard work and dedication to this hard work, despite the pushback from so many people. Thank you for talking so frankly about the risks you and other youth activists face and how you all rise above it anyway. Your groundedness in faith is beautiful. And I'm grateful that you use that and your loving family as your anchor and your compass. Thank you for sharing that with us today. Now that we've heard from each of our panelists, we have about 15 minutes for a panel talanoa, where we're hoping to draw connections across all the things our panelists have touched on. From women's leadership on oceans, climate justice, climate resilience, governance, and the incredible work our young people are doing across the region. I have 1 or 2 questions for our panelists, and then we'd love to hear from you. So please drop your questions and your comments into the chat as well. Flora, I'm hoping to come to you first. From your vast experience of doing this work, what would you say needs to be done to ensure women's voices are not only heard, but valued in governance structures?
Thank you, Fenton. From where I work and the experience that I have seen throughout the years of the work that we do, we need to make sure that spaces are created and are very inclusive. When I'm talking about inclusive, I'm looking at structures, so infrastructure. In some of the meeting places, they're not accessibility friendly for disability inclusion. So if we are holding a space for meeting, it needs to check that one out. And if we wanted our voices to be very feasible in those policy spaces, organization that you are dominated some of those spaces, or let's say you fronted in those places, had some courtesy to invite community networks, community-based organization to come in, because we've got them in the communities, but they were not sort of linked to some of those spaces. They were there, but it will often come in the channel where male leadership will be perceived as they are the one with the mind, they are the one with the power, they are the owners of the land. We acknowledge that men are the owners of the land, but the women was there to complement that leadership. And I think the complementary was not feasible in most of the spaces. So it would be good for organization to open space. And what I have seen in my time is we open space, we hold space, and we allow the policymakers to come. We don't wait for them to invite us. We hold space, we invite them because it's going to be our agenda. Our talk, our rules and our points, our objective, our goals that we wanted to meet, and then we ask them to come in to input. And I think sometimes vice versa, how we do it also explain the context, because our context is very different, or maybe similar to a few of us. But for us, we could see that holding that space, making it available, get the policymakers, even our minister, to come in and sit down, just listen to the women. And some of the women, this is the first time they see someone in suit. And we have seen that it like light bulb, their faces go, oh, we are scared. Should we say something? Is it going to be correct? How we dressed? Do we need, shoes? Do we need to wear something? So, it actually sparks something that, we've never seen men in suit in our circle. So when you invite them, it was another ball game. And giving that confidence for women to participate meaningfully, that's another one. Allow that transformation to happen, not push them to it, but allow the transformation to happen. And then you will see the natural being of, complementing what the leadership role is. You put that into perspective, put it into action. But I think for me is creating that space and allow policymakers to come, because in a lot of cases, policymakers never know us. We were never there. And it will be big organization in front of us. And then they will have to see, where are these women? But when they come down to the community, we are there. But we were not being consulted, we were not being involved. So holding spaces, inviting them in, so then they get to know who you are, where you are, what you do, how you influence, how you transform communities. And I think that's one thing I wanted to put out there. Thank you, Fenton.
Thank you, Flora. That's absolutely correct. If you're out of sight, you're out of mind. So thank you for that. Naima, you spoke a little bit about this, right? Like moving beyond just consultation into genuine inclusion. So I'd love to get your thoughts on how all the incredible work you're doing, AnneMary's doing, Flora is doing, can and should inform regional actions and alliances that can really drive gender inclusive environmental policy.
Sure. I mean, and I echo what Flora has shared so beautifully. I think, when it comes to inclusion and representation, I think there's so much power in storytelling, and that's what we're seeing across the board with this wave of requests for advisory opinions from different courts and tribunals, such as the International Court of Justice, which is set to release its advisory opinion, as Flora mentioned, on the 23rd. I mean, what happened in those courtrooms, and the same was true for the International Tribunal of the Law of the Sea. People were sharing stories from the front lines that could be digested and really there was an opportunity for those stories to sit with the listeners who were coming from totally different backgrounds and realities, right? And then could be translated in ways where all of humanity could understand what the real risks and threats are to our collective humanity. And so when we're thinking about regional actions or alliances that could drive these policies, I think at the regional level, we already have strong foundations. We have organizations like PIFS, SPC, and PENG that are increasingly focused on gender equity and Indigenous leadership and environmental governance. But we do need to go further in connecting these platforms with grassroots women's movements, with youth movements. And I think we have done such a beautiful job of this. I'm thinking of the Pacific Island students fighting climate change. I'm thinking of AnneMary's work. And there are many standing regional advisory groups of Pacific women who are working across climate, land, and ocean issues. not just to advise on gender, but to co-develop policy from the outset. So, you know, I actually think we need stronger cross-country alliances. So when women from the Solomons, Tuvalu, Fiji, and Hawaii come together, the solutions that emerge are often more integrated and visionary than what we see in state-led processes. That's when we see, you know, the blue Pacific and the beauty that brings truly shine. And I think there's huge potential for regional solidarity networks to influence, you know, both local action and intergenerational negotiation spaces. So yeah, I mean, primarily I'd say that some of the most powerful regional action happens through story, through our communities, our young people, our children, our women and men sharing their experiences, not just as case studies, but more so as strategic knowledge that can directly influence and shape, you know, policy, law, and political will.
Yeah, beautiful, Naima. Thank you so much for that, for the reminder of our connectedness, first and foremost. And also you had alluded to this in your presentation, that policy isn't just technical solutions, right? It's relationality and tending to that in really important ways. And I can't agree enough. There is so much power in storytelling and taking something complicated and making it digestible, because it is true, right? You can only reach people at a point that they're capable of believing us, right? So we really have to lean into that storytelling, which is so innate in most Pacific people. And I see that especially with young people in the Pacific, leaning in unapologetically into truth-telling and storytelling. And AnneMary, you do this so well in your work. And I just want to give you a moment to, like, what would you say to encourage more young people to get involved with this this important work on climate justice?
Thank you so much, Fenton, for the question. So basically, you know, supporting everyone in this movement. And, you know, we should all understand that the climate crisis not only affects our islands, but it also affects our human rights, education, security, economy, social status of, you know, our community and nation as a whole. And, you know, as a young person coming into these spaces, you have to grow a thick skin, honestly, because you should, like, young people should be prepared to be criticized, because we are living in a world now that, you know, a lot of people talk, and, you know, people will always have their different opinions on certain things. Whether you are doing climate justice, whether you're doing community work and initiatives, mangrove planting, and etc., etc. I remember when I started, from personal experience, there was a lot of young people that were questioning, saying, "Oh, Anne, you're just 15 years old. Like, who would you inspire?" You know, those are the kind of questions that really, really made me think and say, like, am I doing the right thing? Am I fighting a losing battle? So, you know, all of these kind of questions, they arise when people criticize. And there was a statement that my grandfather said before he passed away in 2019. And he said, Mali. Mali is like a family nickname. So he was like, Mali, if the development has a purpose, then people in the environment will live in harmony. But if the development has no purpose, then the people in the environment will be in chaos. And, you know, these are the words that have been with me ever since. And, you know, sharing that with other young people, encouraging them to step into these spaces. It's really beautiful to see when you have a group of young people that are fighting the same battle as you and that have the same interest and value as you. And, you know, it all comes down to supporting them and their initiatives, and also empowering each other. You know, we can't be talking about youth empowerment yet talk behind someone's back at the same time. And it's, you know, another misconception about, you know, youth coming into these spaces is the fact that there's a lot of competition. You know, competition is present in every space. Competition allows or enables one person to work harder, you know, coming out of their comfort zone. But when it deals with people's lives and the health of our planet, you know, the climate crisis shouldn't be a space where competition is present. And, you know, I've seen a lot of young people that has stepped down from the climate change space. And it's really sad. That's a sad reality that we live now. But seeing a lot of Fijian youth stepping into this to the climate change space and also the climate justice space is also an incredible one. I've also been mentored by an amazing team of climate justice activists, Dr. David Foreman from the University of Hawaii, the Dr. Tony Oposa Jr. from the Philippines, Solomon Yu from Solomons. And I'm very blessed to have them and for them to teach me you know, these kind of policies and also, you know, introducing me to all of these new people to make connections. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. AnneMary, what is your grandfather's name?
Samuela Raduva.
Beautiful. Thank you for bringing him in and his advice into this space. I really appreciate that. And also, you know, just this reminder for all of us, sometimes it's beneficial to really, truly shift our perspectives and operate from a space of abundance as opposed to a space of scarcity. So really appreciate that. I'm going to take some questions from the audience right now. And the first one's for you, Naima. You spoke beautifully about the roles Pacific women play in holding families and communities together and how that knowledge must be central to decision making. In Tuvalu, where do those who don't sit themselves in a binary definition of gender fit into cultural community management? And can that be applied to future decision making in the same or similar ways you envision women's knowledge and roles?
Yeah, thank you. That's such an important question, and one that often gets overlooked in formal climate and governance spaces, I think. In Tuvalu, as in many Pacific cultures, understanding of gender have always been more complex than the binary frameworks introduced, you know, through colonization and religion. And there are people in our communities, including those who identify as whakapawhine, who have long respected roles in caregiving, in community leadership, and cultural life. And so they may not always be formally recognized in political structures, but they're often, you know, deeply embedded in the social and cultural fabric of community and village life. So what I think what's powerful is that their contributions often mirror the same strengths we talk about when we center women's knowledge. There's relational leadership, there's care for land and people, there's cultural continuity and adaptability. So yes, absolutely, their wisdom and their lived experience should be part of how we design future governance models, especially as we, you know, imagine more inclusive approaches to climate decision making. You know, if we're serious about justice, then our systems need to reflect the full spectrum of who our people are, and, you know, who has always been doing the work, even if they weren't named in policy. I also, if it's okay, just wanted to touch briefly on something on a previous point and question that was made around, you know, ensuring women's voices are heard and valued, right? And I think, you know, sometimes the voice of women is lost in political planning and donor-related funding policies, especially conditions that deter organizations from accessing funds for their identified, you know, priorities. And, you know, one of the most important shifts we can make is moving from tokenism to true participation. So that, as a, you know, my colleagues have mentioned, that means ensuring women are not just present in the room, but that their perspectives actually shape the agenda, and that we're recognizing that storytelling, that caregiving, and environmental, stewardship are not outside of governance, but they are forms of governance. So that was just a thought that I wanted to share, because I think often we think of storytelling and caregiving and things like that as soft, right? And really, they should be driving the governance models that determine our resilience and our survival.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Just gonna do a bit of a time check. So I might take one final question from the audience and then move us into some final closing statements. So Flora, this is a question for you. You spoke briefly about the language you use to get support and funding. Are you able to elaborate more on that? Yeah.
Thank you, Fenton. So the language that we usually have in our climate space, or to our donors and partners, or even to our associates, should I say, or consortium, we usually bring in a very comprehensive or holistic approach to the work that we do, because within the climate change space, we are also dealing with gender-based violence. We are also dealing with all sorts of forms of discrimination when we look at inclusion. And because the work that we do was heavily on women and disability, women with disability, that is not something easily taken on board on a lot of conversation within our community. So we use the space, the platform of climate change, in order to ignite those conversations. Now, when we enter a community, climate change is the platform that we go in. We do not go in on gender. We are talking about gender in the community, because the chiefs will be thinking we are the one who put all the males in prison because of gender-based violence. We report them the justice system, and meanwhile, most of our islands don't have police posts. So how can we the protection of women is very crucial when we look at climate crisis, climate change impacts, the slow onset one and the very fast one. So we use that language to make sure that we address discrimination, harassment, the PSCA, physical, sexual exploitation and abuse. Our system that we had currently, if someone, a perpetrator, is there, he will just have to give a mat and a chicken. That's it. Forgiveness is taking place. But the victim will face whatever it's been, the assault or violence for a lifetime. So we have used the climate change space also to make sure that when we are communicating to donors, we say we are not only giving, it's not just a one shot, you looking at it. It has multiple ripple effect along the way. If we got funded for this is what we will also do. Engage on gender-based violence, making sure that women know their rights. So it's not me they are seeing, but it's the community women. They feel confident they can raise those issues in the correct space, or referral pathways. Where are those services being provided? So we use that space for climate change to also getting the women's right into it, because women's right, it's not something easily taken on board with our community leaders. So I think that was how that language has been spoken and has been treated, that when we work in climate change, we also address all the other ones. All the protection issues of family that the women was holding, all that burden should be offloaded into one platform. And this is how we look at it. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Flora. I want to move us into a closing, right? And so I'm going to invite each of the speakers. We'll kick off with you, Naima, then go Flora, then AnneMary, to just offer some closing statements, 1 or 2 sentences to just sort of round up our time today. So whenever you're ready.
I wonder if I can just use my closing thoughts to respond to the question that's been posed in the chat. Because it's a question we sit with often. And, I think one of the biggest barriers I faced is the disconnect between the systems we're working in and the values we're working from. So there's just still so much work to be done to get, our society and our communities and the systems upon which we operate aligned with the values that really speak to the nobility and dignity of every single, life form on this planet. And so I think, a lot of environmental governance spaces, whether local, national, or international, are still built around top-down extractive models that don't always reflect the lived realities, relationships, or the priorities of the communities most affected. And they don't reflect the values, and they don't, serve the desire and the appetite for people to be connected and in close collaboration with each other. And so if we don't have that connection or that sense of collaboration and that spirit of care and mutual, reciprocity, then of course we're not going to come together effectively when there are climate disasters. It's just, that's not a sign of resilience. So part of the work, and sometimes the hardest part, is building new patterns of community life from the ground up. So shifting that ultimately will shift the way decisions are made, so that the relational values, collective care, and equity are at the center. It also means learning how to work across different knowledge systems and ways of leading. So I think we have to change the fabric of how we relate to one another and to our environment. Thank you so much.
Vinaka, Naima, Vinaka. Flora?
Thank you, Fenton. For me, we'll keep on working together for women. You couldn't do anything as an individual, but a collective effort will move a lot of things ahead. And never think that we were too young, or we couldn't do that because we are a mother of 4 or 5, or we've got too many unpaid care work that we do. Always rise above challenges that comes through. Look at it in a very holistic lens, not only a one way, but sort of a two-way. How does it will benefit me, and how it will benefit the next future generation? And I think the looking forward ahead is something we do not always cater for as a women leader. We always think of the now and the present and how we are moving forward, but it's always good to put some goals ahead and see where we wanted to move, what direction, how we are moving and influencing policy, and where are the gaps. And it's always good to question, are we doing it rightly? And also good to hold us accountable. If you've got a group of women, stick to those women, and they will also tell you, I don't think you're doing it right. And, ready to get, it's always not sunshine every now and then. It always comes down with some storms. So ready to praise with the storm, but collectively, not as an individual, you'll fail. So you've got some sisters network, keep that network. And when you move along, don't go alone on yourself, but hold hands with the others and move together. So I think from there, I will leave it as that. And if anyone wanted to talk to me after this, I'm happy to communicate. I think Fenton will share our contacts, right, Fenton?
Yep, we can make sure that's done. Vinaka, Flora.
Thank you.
AnneMary?
Thank you, Fenton. I think one of the main messages that I would like to share with the audience and with everybody today is to just realize how powerful youth voices, women's voices in these spaces and in all spaces. It's not limited to only the climate change space, but we should protect everyone's right. And walking the talk is also a big thing. We just can't be, talking about issues yet, not do anything about it. And that our decisions that we make now will determine our future. Thank you.
Nakawaka Levu, thank you, Naima, Flora, and AnneMary. I'm so grateful you exist, and I'm so inspired by your passion for this work. Thank you for sharing your wisdom so generously. I'll now hand us back to Julie to bring us to a close. Naka Julie.
Oh, wow. I just learned so much from the women leaders here today. Ngā mihi nui to the speakers. The holistic combination of intent and action to uplift inclusiveness and practical outcomes, and the courage it takes to lead, and the clarity about grounding action and theory and Indigenous knowledge, and just the depth, the strategic strength and expertise that you have was so wonderful. It was such a privilege to have you speaking today, and so much to learn. And thanks also to Fenton and to those who've spread the word about our webinar series. And thank you also to those who asked a pātai a question, mihi kia koutou. And to all of you for attending. There is more. We have 2 more webinars in this series. 6th of August from the Pacific shores to the Bay of Bengal, building resilience through governance. We have a speaker from Bangladesh as well as from Pacific. On the 27th of August, safeguarding our Pacific, tackling corruption and protecting communities. And then there'll be a further series of 3 webinars after that, which will follow on women's leadership in the Pacific, which is great to see this coming throughout our whole series. So I'm going to finish on with some lines from a poem by the most amazing Samoan poet, Caroline Sinavai Ana. And she writes poems that pick on just the very ordinary things that are happening, but you see the importance of the whole in what she's talking about. So it's to bring this to a close and to rest and wish us well. To the one who guides the boat against the wind and gives the first speech, me tanga lo langi of the 9 heavens, me sina and Nawhanua, may Yeso Kariso ma Iona Tina guide your boat against the wind into the quiet waters of shimmering nets and the smoke of cook fires rising on the shores of afternoon. Thank you very much. Go well. Haere rā, mā te wā.